Welcome to Cheeseology with Adam, the cheesiest channel on YouTube. I'm Adam. Today we're going to be making a pepper jack cheese. Can't wait for this one, going to be a lot of fun. I picked up some peppers at a local international grocery store. I've never used these peppers before in this cheese, but I'm going to try Arbol chilies and also Ancho chilies. We're going to be making a 2-gallon batch, give us about 2-pound wheel of pepper jack cheese. For this cheese, I'm probably only going to need about 2 of these peppers diced up real fine, and maybe a half of one of these peppers diced up. Once I cut them up, I can kind of see what I have, and I'll go from there. You can always add more, but we just don't want to put too much in, mix it up, and then we're kind of stuck with what we have. So a little bit of experimentation there, but it's going to be a lot of fun. A couple things we're going to need. We're going to need a heat source, stock pot, 2 gallons of milk, cow's milk. I'm just using regular vitamin D milk from the whole milk from the grocery store. Going to need a curd knife, thermometer. Going to need a colander, some cheesecloth, and then we're going to need calcium chloride because we are using pasteurized cow's milk. This will help with the curd formation. And then animal rennet. I use animal rennet. There's a couple different types out there, but I prefer animal rennet. And for our bacteria, we're going to be using C101 bacteria culture. All of the ingredients and actually the equipment as well can be purchased through the link in the description of this video. Okay, we're going to start with filling our stock pot with the 2 gallons of milk. As with any cheese that we make, we want to make sure everything is clean and sanitized. All my equipment is cleaned right now, but the sanitizer, I just have a food grade sanitizer. I can spray in the stock pot and then also spray off my utensils as I use them. So we'll start there. We'll sanitize the stock pot. We're going to put 2 gallons of milk into the stock pot and then add a half teaspoon of our calcium chloride because we're using pasteurized cow's milk. And then from there, we're going to raise the temperature slowly up to 88 degrees. Now that our milk's in, I'm going to add a half teaspoon of calcium chloride. We're going to want to mix this up real well, but remember, sanitize your stir. Certainly don't want to introduce any bacteria that we don't want in the milk. So I'm just going to give this some up and down stirs. Make sure it's mixed in. Now that we're mixed in, I'm going to put the temperature on. We're going to raise this up to 88 degrees. You'll want to clip your thermometer to the side there to monitor the temperature. I'm going to give my lid a quick spray of sanitizer. I'm going to put this over the lid. Just helps any kind of dust or anything from dropping in there while we're waiting for this to get up to 88 degrees. Remember from my other videos, as we're raising the temperature, we want to every so often give it some up and down stirring motions. We don't want the bottom of the milk to get hot while the top is not warming up. Okay, while our milk is heating up, I went ahead and cut up some of the Arbol and Ancho peppers. I took a half of one of the Ancho peppers. That's the darker one here. They're pretty big, dried up. I cut it in half, diced it up real fine. I tasted it, and it's kind of a sweet, smoky type flavor, doesn't have any heat. But the Arbol pepper, which are the red ones here, I took 5 of those, de-seeded them, and then diced those up real fine. What I have with 5 of the Arbol peppers and a half of the Ancho pepper is a pretty good mixture, I think, that looks pretty good. I don't know if I'll need all of this. We don't want to make it so hot it's not edible, but we'll see once we start sprinkling the curd, get it mixed up, and we'll go from there. Our milk is now at 88 degrees. What we want to do is take it off the heat source so it doesn't keep heating. Take our thermometer out, and what we'll want to do now is put our bacteria culture in. We're using C101 culture. that you can get via the link in the description. We're gonna use 1 pack. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna sprinkle it on the top. We're gonna give it about a minute or so to rehydrate. Then we're gonna stir it up. And then we're gonna put the lid on. You can wrap a towel around this. We wanna try to maintain the temperature as close to 88 as possible. And then we're gonna let it sit for 60 minutes. Our culture has rehydrated. We're gonna stir this very nice and slow. Kind of up and down motions. We wanna get the culture mixed thoroughly into the milk from top to bottom. Mix this for 30 seconds or so, just to make sure it's mixed in well. What we're gonna do now is put our lid on, and then we're gonna wrap it with something. I happen to have a neoprene jacket that I use. Not everyone's gonna have this, but you can just use a towel or something. We're gonna set our timer for 1 hour, and then we'll be ready to add the rennet. Now that the bacteria culture has been sitting, working in the milk for an hour, now it's time to add our rennet. We're gonna add a 1/4 teaspoon of rennet, I use animal rennet, to a 1/4 cup of non-chlorinated water. You just swirl it around. What you're doing is just diluting it a little bit before putting it into the milk. So now that I have this mixed up, I'm going to add this to my milk. Pour it in slow. And now I'm going to mix it up good. Up and down motions like we did with the bacteria culture. I want to make sure this rennet is in there, worked in well. And then what we'll do is we're going to let this set an hour. Again, try to keep it warm. Wrap a towel around it, something like that. We want to try to keep this warm. And when we come back, we will cut our curd. Now it's been an hour. The curd has set up. Now what we want to do is cut the curd. You're going to take a curd knife. You want to make a series of checkerboard pattern vertically, just like strips, about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch wide. Once you do it vertically, you're going to wait about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we're going to do them horizontally, and then wait another 3 to 5 minutes. The reason we're waiting 3 to 5 minutes is to let the curd heal a little bit before continuing to the next step. As we're waiting for the curds to heal after the first series of vertical cuts, we're going to put our thermometer back into the curd and see where we are. Hopefully we're still close to 88 degrees. If not, we're going to heat it back up to 88 degrees and then the next step. It should not have dropped very much. Okay, it looks like my curd dropped to about 82 degrees. That's perfectly fine. A little bit lower than I would have liked, but that's okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make the horizontal cuts, and then we're going to let that heal, and then we will start heating the curd back up to 88 degrees and stirring slowly. Again, when you make your horizontal cuts, you kind of want to try to hold your knife on an angle, or else you're going to end up with strips of curd from going straight down to the bottom of the pot. So I kind of just put it on an angle to help cut it so it's not actually in strips within the pot. The goal here is to have about 1/2 inch size cubes of curd. That's not really going to happen like that, but we want to get close to that as possible. As you're stirring the curd, if you're using pasteurized milk, you're going to see it's going to break apart. When we're stirring this and heating this up in the next couple steps, you want to do it very slowly. You don't want to try to shatter the curds. You want to try to just do it slowly so they stay in around 1/2 inch size pieces. But you'll see what I mean when we get to that step here in a moment. If you're using raw milk holds the curd together much better. You don't have the shattering like you do with using pasteurized milk. Pasteurized milk makes perfectly good cheese. I make tons of cheeses with pasteurized milk. Actually, that's mainly what I use because it's just easier to get and it's much cheaper than getting raw milk, at least in my area. You can make a lot of fabulous cheeses with pasteurized milk. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put this back on our heat source. We're going to put our thermometer back into the pot. And we're going to get this back up to 88 degrees. All right, I'm going to start stirring the curd now. Oh, this looks really good. It formed really well. Right now at this step, all we're doing is just very lightly stirring and then getting the curd back up to the original 88 degrees. We're going to stir this at 88 degrees for about 10 minutes, very slowly. After we stir this for about 10 minutes, very slowly, then it's time to cook the curd. What that means is we're going to raise the temperature to 95 degrees slowly over about a half an hour, and then stir this for 30 minutes to 60 minutes very slowly. The reason we're doing that is by raising the temperature, you're actually drawing moisture out, you're drawing the whey out of the curd. This is going to be a pressed cheese. We don't want mushy, we do want a moist curd, which I'll show you when we get to the washed curd step, but we want to get the whey and the lactose out of this curd right now. So that's the reason we quote unquote cook the curds. So once we're at 88 degrees again, and we've stirred for about 10 minutes, we're going to raise the temperature slowly over about a half an hour to 95 degrees. I mentioned that we'll be stirring for about 30 to 60 minutes. It's all dependent on what your curd is like. And in other videos, I've said this, just because a recipe says stir the curd or cook the curd for so much time, doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that. It goes by what you're looking for in the curd. If you're making a softer cheese, like a soft moist cheese, like the blue cheese that I made recently, the video's on my YouTube channel, I wanted that curd to stay pretty moist. So once it got to a certain dryness, and you can feel it by squeezing the curds, I stopped stirring at that point. I wasn't quite at where the recipe said to go, but just by squeezing the curd, I can tell that I didn't want to go any further with drawing more moisture. And really that comes with experience. If you dry the curd out too much, so we stir this for a full 60 minutes at 95 degrees, my curd is probably going to be dried out too much because, like I said, I'm using pasteurized milk. The curds break up finer, so the smaller the curd, the easier it is for moisture to leave those and dry out. And what will happen is you'll have a cheese, you'll have curd, and when you go to press it, it's not going to press properly. You're not going to close all the gaps in the cheese surface when you press it, and you want a nice smooth surface on the cheese. I brought the curd back up to 88 degrees. I'm stirring now for about 10 minutes very slowly. Now what we're going to do is I lowered my heat a little bit because I really want to slow down the rate of the heat heating up the curd. We want to raise this to 95 degrees over the course of about a half an hour, and during that time slowly stir on and off. You're going to notice as we're doing the first part of the cooking of the curd, raising it to 95 degrees very slowly, that as you're stirring, if you stop, the curds are going to start sinking. You're going to see more whey on top. The reason the curds are sinking is because they're not as buoyant now because you are cooking the whey out of them. They're drying out. So they're becoming less buoyant, causing them to sink down into the pot. What you want to do is once you hit 95, you don't want to take it past that. So what I did once I reached 95 degrees is I took it off my heat source and I'll continue to stir it as I mentioned before, about 30 to 60 minutes. The curd that we're looking for after doing the cooking is a curd that is kind of firm throughout. If you take some in your fingers and you press it, it should be slightly spongy, a little firm, and have moderate resistance. That's the final curd moisture that we're looking for this step. If you take your pot off your heat source once you get to 95 degrees, if it starts dropping below 95, you can always just put it back on to keep it at 95. I find with this electric hot pad, even if I just shut it off, it still keeps rising because the pad's hot. So sometimes I'll just take it off and then put it back on a couple times just to kind of stay at 95 or whatever temperature I'm looking for. And that seems to do the trick. Now that we've cooked our curd and dried it out to the desired firmness in the curd, what we're going to do now is we're going to remove about half the whey or so we just want to leave about an inch over the curds. Once you stop stirring, you probably already noticed this, the curd immediately drops to the bottom. That's because the curds are dried out now. So we're going to let these drop to the bottom. We won't be heating them up anymore. And then we're going to use a bowl or a cup, and we're going to remove the whey till we're about an inch off of the curd. What we're going to do from there is we're going to add cool water back into the curd, dropping it down to 75 degrees. There's two reasons for this. We want a moist curd going into this form. I know we just dried it out, but what we're doing is pulling out the whey, pulling out the lactose. The reason we're removing the whey is so we can stop or slow down the bacteria activity. We want to slow down the acid production. Well, that will leave us with a sweeter curd or a sweeter cheese as a final product. So two things. One, we want a sweeter cheese as a final product, and two, by adding cool water into this washed curd technique, where the curd will actually absorb the cool water. If we added warm water, warmer than what the curd is now, it would dry it out. And for some cheeses, you do that. But for this cheese, we want to add cool water so the curd absorbs some of that water to make it moist. And then two, we're removing a food source for the bacteria, so the bacteria won't produce as much acid, and it'll leave the cheese, the final product will be a slightly sweeter cheese. It's exactly what we want for a pepper jack cheese. So right now, I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab a cup. I'm going to take off the whey, and then I'm going to start adding water back into it. As I remove the whey, I'm just going to dump it into a bucket, and this will just be dumped down the drain. I won't reuse this for anything. So you want to be careful. You don't want any of the curd in there. All the big curd will be down at the bottom. There's always going to be a little bit of stuff floating at the top. That's fine. So this shouldn't be too hard to just skim the whey off. The reason it's not going to be that hard is because we dried it out enough that it's really sunk to the bottom. Sometimes we don't cook it as long for certain cheeses, and it will sink, but it'll easily float if disturbed. This, I'm not even getting any big chunks up yet, and I'm getting a lot of whey off of the top here. Okay, I'm starting to see curd now. I've skimmed off the whey. I'm about an inch or so, maybe a little bit less than that, to the curd. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to slowly add cool water. This is just tap water, non-chlorinated water, to the curd back into the pot until it stabilizes at 75 degrees. So I'm going to add it slow, and I'm going to start stirring, make sure it's all mixed in well. This won't take a whole lot of water. It's dropping pretty good already. I'm down to 88 degrees already from 95. So we're doing two things here. We remove the food source so that lactic acid creation from the bacteria slows down. And we're also, with the cool water, re-moistening the curd, but with just water, not whey. And that will give us a moist curd going into the form. I just added about a gallon back. I'm going to see where that takes us. Curd's still dropping. I'm about 80 degrees. I only need about 5 more degrees. I think I'll stop there because I think it'll still keep dropping a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stir this for about 15 minutes. And then from there, we're going to drain it into our colander lined, into our cheesecloth lined colander. And then we'll separate the whey from the curd. We'll add our salt, mix that up. And then the fun part, we're going to add our pepper and mix that up. And then we're going to put it in a form. As I continue to drop this down to 75 degrees over 15 minutes, I continue to stir slowly. This is what the curd should look like. This is perfect, has a moderate resistance, firm throughout, and I can already feel it's much cooler than it was. I think this is going to turn out really well. Now that I brought the curd down to about 75 degrees over 15 minutes and I've been stirring slowly, now it's time to drain the curd. You want to dump this into your cheesecloth lined colander, or you'll see in a moment I use a shallow tub that I drilled holes in it so it can drain. I do that because it lets me spread it out better. For this cheese, I'm going to be mixing in the pepper, so I want to make sure the curd's all spread out well so I can mix it in Just a little bit easier for me. But colander will work fine in your kitchen sink. Now I'm going to drain the curd into my pan. Okay, you're going to want to let this drain for a few minutes. Now pick this up. There's a whey is draining onto the pan I have underneath. So I'm just letting this drain. You can do all of this right in your sink at home. So next thing we're going to do here is we're going to salt this curd. You want to take about 2.5% of the weight, that much in salt, to salt this cheese. For this 2-gallon batch, that comes out to about 1 ounce of salt. So I've already measured that 1 ounce of salt. And you want to add it in about 2 or 3 different iterations. I'm just going to split it in half. I'm going to, once I'm done draining this a little bit, I'm going to sprinkle about half on, mix it up real good, and then I'll sprinkle the other half on, and then mix that up good. Then we'll put our pepper in. So I'm going to spread this curd out evenly. I'm going to put about half this salt on in, and measure it out into my beaker. I'm just going to sprinkle it over. And I'll mix this up. Now I'm going to put the other half in. And mix this up real good. Make sure we mix it in real well. All the curd gets it. We don't have big deposits of salt in there. So I'm just going to kind of flip this over. Mix it in a little bit. Flip it over again that way. Mix this in. That should be pretty good. We're going to be mixing more here in a moment with our pepper. I'm going to grab some gloves for that. And we'll mix the pepper in. I've got some gloves on. Now I'm just going to use all this pepper. I don't know if it's going to be too little. I don't think it's going to be too much, but it's the first time doing this, so we'll see what we get. So sprinkle it all around. That looks really nice. Okay. Now we're going to mix this up good. Like I did before, flip it a couple times like that. This red pepper looks like it's turning the curd a little red. That's kind of neat. All right, I think that's mixed up pretty good. What we're going to do now is we're going to take this cheesecloth, kind of bunch it up, and we're going to put it in our form, and we're going to start pressing. So what I'm going to use for this cheese is a medium size hard cheese press. It's a little bit thicker than some because it's for harder cheeses. You can use it for softer cheeses, just build it a little bit better. We have the press, we have the form, and then we have what's called a follower that will go over top. First I'm going to sanitize both of these with my spray. And then I'm just going to lay in that cheesecloth with the curd, and we will begin pressing. So the pressing intervals for this cheese is going to be 8 pounds at 15 minutes. And then we're going to take it out of the form. We're going to unwrap it. We're going to flip the cheese over, rewrap it, put it back in the form for 2 hours at 20 pounds. And at the end of that, we're going to take it out of the form again, rewrap it, and then flip it, and then 4 hours at 40 pounds. And during that 4 hours, we're going to flip it every hour. So here's my form. Here's our curd that we just mixed together. We're going to put our cheese, our curd, in the form. And we're going to open this up. There's a lot of fabric in here. I used a big piece. What I want to make sure is that it's like a level. I don't want a cheese that's going to press all sideways. I want a nice pressed cheese. So I'm just going to level this off a little bit. And then do this, make sure it's No air pockets. Now what I'm going to do, just fold over one side of that. This is the way I do it. And I'm going to put the follower in. And that's how we start. Now I have this. I'm going to tuck this, not really tuck, just hang up this cheesecloth, this extra cheesecloth, so it doesn't lay into the way that's draining off. I'm going to put this onto our cheese press. So I'm just hanging this over my sink so it can just drain into the sink. I'm going to hang the equivalent of 8 pounds. Again, you can learn how to use the cheese press on my other video. I'm going to start right there, and that will begin the pressing. So that's at about 8 pounds for 15 minutes, and then we're going to take it out and flip it. And those red peppers did absolutely color the way, so it should be an interesting cheese. All right, 15 minutes has gone by. What we're going to do is we're going to take the weight off. We're going to take the cheese out of the form. We're going to flip it, and then we're going to put it back in the form, and then we're going to press it for 2 hours at 20 pounds. Every time we flip this cheese, you're going to see it's going to consolidate better and better, and the sides will get flatter. First time you flip it, it's going to seem like it's going to fall apart on you probably, but just be careful and just flip it, and then look at that, how well it's already pressing. That's great. Form back, put it back in the form. There we go. You can see that, it's back in the form. I'm going to cover it up with one side of this, and then we're going to press for 2 hours, 20 pounds. You're going to see that it's going to shrink more and more as you press it and flip it. It's going to consolidate more, and this part is going to go, this follower is going to go farther down into the cheese. All right, everyone, we finished pressing our pepper jack cheese through the cycles, and then I've let it air dry for a couple days. As you can see, because of the peppers I've used, it's given this pepper jack a really nice color. Some of the peppers have bled into the actual coloring of the curd itself. I think this is going to be great. What we're going to do from here is, for this cheese, you can either wax it and then put it in your aging space, or what I've been doing and having some real good luck with is vacuum sealing. When you do this, what's nice about vacuum sealing is all you have to worry about in your aging space is temperature, between 52 and 55 degrees for 2 to 3 months. So that's great, and that's usually the hardest part about setting up an aging space, is controlling your humidity. So you just I use a mini fridge, you can see in another video that I have, I use a mini fridge on a controller. When it reaches 52 degrees, it shuts off. When it warms up to 55, it turns on. Works perfect. So I'm really excited about this cheese. In 3 months, I'm going to let this go to 3 months, because the longer you let a cheese go, the more complex the flavor will get. In 3 months, it's the beginning of March, because it's beginning of December right now. I'm going to cut this, and we'll show that in another video. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe.